Success happens at the exit of our comfort zone. That is what we are going to be diving in deep today with my guest, and I can't wait for you to think about all the ways that you can drive success and also believe that you have a path forward. Welcome to Women Leaders on the Move, a Her C-Suite Radio podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Benamou, and every week I learn right alongside you from amazing guests like my guest today. I'm also the founder of Her C-Suite, a portfolio career network focused on helping women build what's next. We are going to dive in deep with Lisa Davis. She's the founder and CEO of Davis Core Advisory, a CIO Hall of Fame inductee, corporate board director, former Fortune 100 executive, and the arc of her career is going to surprise you. I cannot wait for you to hear all the details. Let's get started with this conversation now. Lisa, I am so excited to welcome you to Women Leaders on the Move today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm so excited to talk to you. And yes, we are Women Leaders on the Move.
When I read your bio and all the things that you've been doing, I can't wait for our listeners to find out because there are 98 countries listening in to this story today, and it's going to resonate with women everywhere. I would love to share the snapshot of you and what brings us to this moment because you've had an incredible career that brought you to today.
I've actually been a career technologist, a chief information officer for 4 decades. I started right out of college as an computer engineering undergrad, working for the federal government. And I had a 26-year career in Department of Defense and Department of Justice, where I ultimately served as a chief information officer for the U.S. Marshals Service, which I'm very proud of, and a CIO over the counterintelligence field activity. After having a full career in government, I retired, or I decided to then continue with my career, and I transitioned to be the CIO at Georgetown University. So as you can imagine, a completely different sector, 180 degrees opposite, which was fascinating. Loved that opportunity. But the ultimate goal was to be in high tech. So I had the ability, moved the family cross country, took a role at Intel Corporation, where I served 18 months on the technology side, and then had an incredible opportunity to run a multi-billion-dollar P&L for Intel's largest business unit, data center group. And I oversaw globally enterprise and government P&L for that business unit. The last 5 years, after having that opportunity at Intel, really working across all sectors, wanting to understand where I could drive the most impact in my career, I decided to move to healthcare. And we all have our own personal experiences with healthcare. So I spent the last 5 years as the Chief Information Officer at Blue Shield of California. A year ago, I decided to stop being a full-time operator, start my own company, Davis Core Advisory, where I have a portfolio career, where I do my board advising and governance work. I do coaching and mentoring of leaders. I'm still doing consulting with many healthcare companies. And as you said, I actually published my first book, which I'm really excited about, called The Only Woman in the Room, How to Win in a Workplace Still Built for Men, and would love to unpack that with you.
What I love is that you didn't stay in one sector. You've moved in different sectors and rose into these really big leadership roles. Was there any pivotal moment that made you decide to shift from government to private sector or from Intel to healthcare? Were there any moments along those journeys that made you decide, okay, I'm going to try this now?
Yeah, I think it was primarily fueled by my own curiosity and continued learning. The great thing about technology is technology translates across many different sectors. But as we know, in each of those sectors, it's different cultural situations. They're all adopting technology maybe at a different pace than certain other sectors are. So learning and adapting and evolving and bringing my technology experience and background, applying it to that particular sector was really fascinating to me. And, interesting, Natalie, when I was doing that maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago, many folks would have looked at that career path and said, well, this is odd because she's jumping and transitioning into these different sectors. What you hear now, which I'm like, well, maybe I created this, is purposely being nonlinear by design, right? So I talk about that in my book of my career was nonlinear by design. It was purposeful because I would take that technology, that experience, that knowledge, and then I would apply it to that particular sector, whether it was academia or high tech. And then I would continue to grow and learn of how best to do that to support those particular companies or that mission.
Well, I think because you are on a number of boards and you have been on boards, and one of the number one qualities for a great board director is curious mindset. So knowing that you have that is not surprising to me because of the work that I do with boards and women getting on boards. But one of the things that struck me in the work that you did in writing your book is not just being the only woman or the first woman and all of that, but I've been reflecting on it this week because this is my second podcast. I'm at 380 interviews. And I think back to the time when I started her C suite and I thought, oh, we're going to change how women are represented in the C suite. And I'm looking back at 6 years and I'm like, the numbers are not shifting the way we would expect. And you went through all these different industries. What did you see as a through line in that experience, being a curious learner and director and leader?
The through line that I saw was, frankly, the lack of women at the executive leadership table. And like you said, how many interviews that you have conducted? I mean, I spent literally 40 years. Of course, growing up in Department of Defense, I mean, that was an incredible learning experience because I was literally the only woman in the room. In academia, as a CIO, I think at most there are 20% female CIOs. So at the executive table for technology, very few women. High tech, well, that speaks for itself in terms of how many women we normally see. And I probably saw more women at the executive leadership table in healthcare than I saw in previous sectors, which was fantastic. But that is really what was fueling the book for me. And of course, naming the title The Only Woman in the Room, because the data is definitely not improving. There is considerable work to do. And the subtitle was really important to me because a lot of folks, men read the title and they're like, here we go, another woman writing her story. But the purpose of the subtitle was to build awareness that our workplace environment, the infrastructure we work in, was created after World War II, where the man went to work, the woman stayed home, raised a family, etc., and the home. That is not the reality of what we live in today. We know that women are over half the population. I believe 60% of women are working or in dual careers. Of that 60%, 60% are primary breadwinners, so we are providers in the economy today. And yet, the workplace structure is still built for men. Lack of paid family leave as one of the most modern industrialized countries in the world. Lack of affordable childcare. Lack of remote and flexible work policies to support women. So that is the purpose of the book, is not only to help women and diverse leaders navigate their careers of what it takes to persevere and succeed to reach the executive table, but to also call out that at the end of the day, the workplace needs to shift to support both men and women in the workplace.
Women are coming up to you and sharing their stories. What are some things that are really sticking with you?
Yeah, that has been one of the most impactful things from writing the book and speaking and meeting with so many women. is their stories they're bringing to me. And sadly, and very frustratingly, they usually start with, Lisa, I'm the only woman in the room, and this is what's happening. It was one thing to tell my story, and I do believe in the power of storytelling because so many of us can feel that it must be me. We personalize the experience. What am I doing wrong? And when we share stories, you realize that, oh no, women are having the same experience. And there's an opportunity to build community and learn from that community. So, what I've decided to do now, Natalie, is amplify other women's voices. And I'm hoping by amplifying their voices through my Substack, and maybe something evolves after the Substack. I'm going to be doing that once a month. I started today, as a matter of fact, that they'll build more awareness of what is actually still occurring in the workplace. And I'm hoping with that awareness, we can ultimately create the system change that is needed in the workplace to support women.
I know you're passionate about women in STEM, and so am I. And I feel like that is an area that is probably even more of a place where women aren't as, the numbers aren't as big. What have you seen that women are doing differently to change that? Do you think with the evolution of AI, it's helping or not helping? That's a space that I am oftentimes, I think it can be really great and then also not great. So, what are you seeing that's helping women in technology since that's been your background?
AI, I believe, can be a great equalizer because in the past, you needed to be likely a technologist to understand and apply the technology. What's beautiful about AI is that we can all learn AI. It's democratized the technology. So I always encourage women, we need to take a seat at the table. Right now, we have less than 20% representation. We certainly see that very visibly of who is running the top AI companies today in the market. And my biggest concern is if we think about in terms of AI modeling, we're perpetuating bias at scale. Many of those models are built on data. Most of that data has been created by men, is pulled by men. And this is why women's voices and representation in AI is critically important. So it doesn't matter if you're a sociologist, if you're an anthropologist, if you're a marketer, if you're an attorney, there is a place, no matter what your profession is, in this world of artificial intelligence for you to play. So I really want to encourage women, learn, grab a seat at the table, and get involved what's happening in artificial intelligence. Sadly, I'm not seeing those numbers, and this is really a call to action. But even from a broader technology standpoint, if we look at the number of women majoring in computer engineering, electrical engineering, I'm going to put computer science to a side right now because of what's happening with artificial intelligence, the numbers have decreased significantly. And even though, and this is a crazy statistic, women earn more bachelor's, master's, and PhDs. Why isn't, you would say, we're seeing this incredible pipeline of women ready for these executive roles? And as you know, Natalie, it's because we have a pipeline problem, right? Women come out of school, they're eager, they start their careers. I have a daughter that's 23 years old. She's the same. And then, they approach their 30s, they're looking to have a family. And it's extremely difficult to manage a career, both career and having a family at the same time. And that is where we lose so many women in the pipeline. So this is why it's critical that we create those systemic changes so women can figure out a path to do both more easily than those of us that went through it the old-fashioned way.
It's interesting about AI because when I started, I wasn't sure, right? I was kind of skeptical. And then I had a pivotal moment last fall where I started seeing these numbers, and you mentioned the heads of the big AI companies, all the articles and all the news. There's no women in any of it. And so I started Next to Lead AI, which is a program because I want women to drive the AI conversation, at every level. So for our daughters, because my daughter's 24, so we have daughters similar age, and they're not loving AI because of the impact on the workforce. But I do think that it does equalize somewhat in if we weren't in STEM. So I was not in STEM at all. And I'm a curious learner. And I've loved that I can learn now. I don't have to know coding. I could just, vibe code something. And it's like, wait a second, I can actually create this thing.
And that is a women to begin their own companies, become founders, become CEOs, leverage what this technology brings to the table, and create what you're passionate about.
Because you are on boards and the roles that you've had, what is happening in the boardroom? I know we could talk a lot about opportunity for women in the boards, but the actual impact of AI on decision making and the infrastructure, you mentioned that all this data that was not gathered around women, we'll just say that the data that was gathered before it was the large language models were created was pulling from things that were not necessarily our voice. That we know, right? And then you multiply that and you get it into boardrooms, and boards are deciding the direction of the company and they're deciding growth and transformation. How is that all playing into decision making, and what can we think about differently?
First, I want to make a plug for boards. Unfortunately, we've also taken a step backward of getting women on boards. We know that, but we're not going to go there. But I also want to call out a kind of a broader issue. Boards are still traditionally board recruitment, and members of the board are CFOs and CEOs. And in today's market, where every company is a technology company, and we're in this accelerated pace with artificial intelligence, boards really need to have digital technology AI leaders to really augment the expertise sitting at the board director level. And the reason I share that is because it then brings a better understanding of what it takes to actually successfully implement the technology in that particular company, in that enterprise. Because what we're seeing today from boards is an incredible amount of pressure being put on the CEOs and the executive leadership team. Why aren't you using AI? What can we do lately? Where is AI? Show me 10x improvement. And they have these incredible demands, right questions to be asked, but it's also important to understand how that is ultimately going to occur and what is going to be required in order for that particular company to succeed in the implementation of that capability. Without that knowledge to share at a board level, I think the boards really aren't prepared to understanding what it's going to take in supporting the use of AI. It's more of a mandate without the understanding of what implementation actually looks like. So that's going to be my plug number one. And I also think there's an importance for CHROs, right? Because at the end of the day, this is about change management. It's about people and talent management. It's augmentation of new skills. All of that needs to come together with your technology digital leader, your HR leader, your business leader, et cetera, in the company. It's a holistic transformation to implement and use AI and actually deliver the ROI that the board is ultimately looking for. So I work with many companies today that are frankly struggling with keeping the pace, understanding the complexity, trying to differentiate themselves in the market with AI because it's the new buzzword. And the one thing I always tell them, never start with the technology first. Always really start with what is the business problem we're trying to solve? What are the outcomes and priorities we're trying to accelerate? And then we apply the technology to enable those business outcomes.
I'm so glad you said that because I hear about it and read about it, and you can just tell the companies that are not doing that. If you look at how they're performing, if they're publicly traded, certainly we can see it easier than the private sector. But people that are not using the technology, so they don't understand it, they're not using it, and maybe they've tried ChatGPT once and that's it. That's their experience right there. And then they're saying, well, I think this will really be beneficial to the company. Let's mandate it. So there's already this gap, right? But the problem to be solved, that's an age-old technique of running companies. Why have they forgotten that? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's one thing to use an LLM, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever one is your preference. It's another thing to implement the technology at scale and the security that needs to be had in order for that company to not only be successful, but to drive the ROI that you're trying to gain. So, without that knowledge of enterprise implementation and what that requires from a holistic transformation, it's very easy to be a board member and say, what have you done for me lately in the world of AI? And knowing to ask the appropriate questions is, do you have the right prioritization? Do we know what problem we're trying to solve? Are we secure? Are we thinking about how we're protecting our data? Are we know what our outcomes and the ROI that we're driving to? All of these things, people, change, has to be thought through. And I think boards have an opportunity, knowing that, bringing in the right expertise so that we can help these companies succeed.
And I'm glad you mentioned human capital earlier because I think that that is the one thing that if you don't integrate, if you don't understand the problem you're solving and you're layering on this system, and yes, it's very complex if you're doing enterprise across big companies, but you're forgetting that human capital perspective and there's this gap, something's going to go awry probably. So for women that are coming at this point and they're hearing this conversation, they're like, okay, but how does this impact where I am today? And I think that's some of the challenge because they are in this midst of doing a lot of things, a lot of hats. So what are you seeing and what can you suggest to her that's the person that's listening in today?
I think I would ask her first, what are our professional goals? What is it you want to accomplish in your career? And I always believe in being very purposeful in terms of how you work towards those goals. And I talk about in the book the value and the importance of relationships, right? We're in a market, we're in an economy today, certainly with the use of artificial intelligence, that human connection is critically important. So I would always encourage, no matter where you are in your career, build relationships, build connections. Ultimately, those connections and relationships, and certainly in my case, my last 5 executive roles came from my network, not because I applied for any of those jobs. So, number one. Number two, I would say to be curious, to learn, understand what's happening in the market financially with artificial intelligence. How does that apply to what you do? Prepare yourself. And all of us can do that. There's tons of sources that are available to learn AI and determine how your company's using it and how you can get involved. Third, I would say, are you enjoying what you're doing? Are you being supported in the company, in the culture? Does your supervisor know your professional goals? Is there a path for your growth? As women, we have a tendency to stay because of the fear of change and disrupting all the other things we have going in our lives with maybe our children, after work requirements, whatever we may have. But, I'm a firm believer at the end of the day, life is too short if you're not finding the joy, passion, and you're not being supported in a culture that you are in. So build those connections where you want your career to move to. So I think about that in terms of, my operational network. In 2 or 3 years, where do I want to be? And what are those relationships I should think about in terms of development? And then even more strategically, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, what do you think you want to be doing? Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's an opportunity for more discovery and curiosity. And where can I build those relationships to learn more? as to what that role may be or what that company is particularly doing. And maybe there's a sector like what I've done that, you know what? I've been here in this sector for 3, 5, 7, whatever the amount of years is. Let's go apply what I know in that experience. Yes, it can be a little fearful, but we all know that growth usually happens at the exit of your comfort zone. So if you're comfortable and you know you can do that job when you're, sleeping at night, you wake up the next day, I would encourage you to say, it's time for me to take some risk, put myself out there, because that's when the real learning occurs. And frankly, it's fun, keeps things interesting and exciting as you continue to build your career.
It's true that we tend to want to stay comfortable, but if we exit that comfort zone, that is really when we can really rocket forward in whatever direction we decide is the right one, which I think is what you were saying here. Oh my gosh, Lisa, I don't want to let you go. I could talk to you all afternoon. It's so hard. But you've got this new Substack, you've got your newsletter, you're doing amazing things. You've got your book, which of course I'll have the link and all the information, and you're speaking. Where should people go first to find you? What's the best place?
I would love the community to reach out on LinkedIn and check out my Substack. I'm really proud to be amplifying other women's voices, and I would love to hear the feedback of how that is resonating. And if you have ideas or you have your own story to tell, I would love to hear that story. Of course, protect it anonymously so that others can learn from our stories. And I believe that when we do this, we build this incredible community of support for each other. And that's ultimately how women will thrive in the workplace. So you can find me there. Of course, I have a webpage that lists all the services of my company, daviscoreadvisory.com. So lots of information on that page. And I'd love to hear from the community.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Natalie. It was such a pleasure. I hope we can do it again.
Thanks so much for tuning in today with this conversation. I know that hearing the arc of someone's career like Lisa Davis, hearing how she went from Department of Defense, she rose to leadership in Intel, and then was leading a very big provider, Blue Cross in California. That is incredible, but also it shows you that with intention, through connection, you can design and build the life and career of your dreams. I hope that you feel inspired by the advice that Lisa shared at the end. If you found this conversation helpful, will you share it with a friend or colleague? I am sure that she is going to find it equally helpful, and it might be just what she needs. If you rate and review the show, it would mean the world to me. It's how people find us. And link in with me. I love hearing from our listeners, as does Lisa. We'd love to have connection with you on LinkedIn. And most importantly, keep shining your light bright. The world needs you. Wait, don't go. I would love for you to join me in her C-suite. We have programs including Next to Lead AI and our Women on Boards that are designed just for you and your portfolio career. Check it all out at hercsuite.com now.